y'all. Today on Restless Chipotle, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things in the entire world, homemade bread. And this homemade bread is extra special because you can make this baguette or French bread, whatever you want to call it. You can make it in just 30 minutes. 30 minutes, start to finish. From the time that you pull the stuff out of your pantry to the time you are slicing this and put it on the table, 30 minutes. Stay tuned and see how we do it. All right, I've already turned the oven on so it can start to preheat, and I'm going to put things together here while I'm waiting for that. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm going to pour in water, and I've checked the temperature. It's 110 degrees, which is just about where I like it to be. So we're going to put that in there. And then our yeast is going to go in. And then sugar, which helps the yeast to grow. We're gonna just stir that up a little bit. And then I'm gonna let it set for about 10 minutes so that the yeast has a chance to grow. If there's a problem, I'll know it before I get halfway done with the bread. And we'll just sit there and watch that grow, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So it hasn't been 5 minutes yet, but you can see the yeast getting foamy. Well, actually, it's been 5 minutes. It hasn't been 10 minutes yet. You can see the yeast getting foamy, and that tells me that it's working. We're not going to wait any longer because I want to push this through and get it done. But that's what it's going to look like when it foams up. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put in 1 cup of the flour, and I am using all-purpose today. You can use bread flour, that's fine. I'm using all-purpose, and I'm adding a tablespoonful of wheat gluten to help it rise better. So if you use the bread flour, you don't have to use the gluten. If you use all-purpose flour, you still don't have to use the gluten, but it's better if you do. So I'm gonna put in 1 cup of that and turn it on. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to scrape this flour down off here just so it gets in there better. The next thing I'm going to do is add my salt. I didn't want to add the salt before I got some flour in there because salt actually inhibits the growth of yeast, and we want the yeast to be coated with the flour before it comes in contact with the salt. So always put a little bit of flour in there before the yeast. Always put a little bit of flour in there before you put the salt in there, unless your recipe tells you differently. So we're gonna let the salt and the 1 cup of flour and the 1 tablespoon of gluten flour, I am going to turn the mixer on and let that go for a couple of minutes just to get it really good and mixed up and start to get the gluten developing in it. So I'm going to scrape this down, and then I'm going to start adding the rest of the flour about a half a cup at a time until I get a soft dough. You want it to look about like that. I maybe even may put a little bit more flour in there, but that will show in the recipe. So we're going to use this to kind of get things where they need to be, and I'm going to let it go for a few more minutes. You want it to be soft, but you don't want it to be so soft that it shreds like that. So we're gonna let it knead in the machine for about 5 minutes. And then I'm gonna turn it out onto my counter and knead it by hand for a few minutes just to make sure I have it right. So I'm sprinkling the counter with some flour. When you make bread, if you've never made bread before or if you're very new at it, one thing to keep in mind is that there's no exact amount of flour that's right. One day you may use 4 cups of flour, the next day you may use 6 cups of flour. It does vary for a lot of reasons. So always be prepared to put a little more, a little less in there. And you'll know that as you have more experience, because you'll know when the dough feels right. That's one of the reasons that I like to hand knead my dough even after it's been in the mixer, because that way I can make sure that it is exactly the texture that I want it to be. Right now, it's pretty soft and sticky, but still doable. All right, so kneading is easy. You just make your dough into a ball. You're gonna push it away from you and then fold it over and do a half turn. Push it away from you, fold it over and do a half turn. Push it away, fold it over, do a half turn. And you're just going to knead the dough like that without adding too much flour, because as I said, this is a pretty soft dough. You don't want it to be too stiff, because then you won't have that nice French bread inside that you're looking for. So we're gonna knead that until, honestly, when you can, I'm gonna put a little bit more flour in there just so I can show you. You're gonna knead the dough. What you're doing when you're kneading the dough is you're helping the gluten to develop. And when it's developed, it'll be elastic. That means that you can pull on it and it will squish back together. So if I have a round and I put my finger in it to make a dent, the dent will come back up. I want to do that so you can see it. There's the dent, and the dent disappears. That's from the gluten. That's what gives it its elasticity and its stretch. The way that your bread dough is going to feel when it's kneaded correctly and it's finished being kneaded is if you pinch a piece of dough like this, it'll feel exactly like your earlobe when you pinch it. It's a little weird, it's an old trick, but it works. Once we have it all kneaded, we're going to cut it in half and make 2 loaves out of it. We're going to try to get them about the same size, and so we can get them the same size, we're going to weigh them to make sure we're pretty close. It doesn't have to be exact, but pretty close is good. So that one is 1 pound, 1 ounce, and that one is 14 ounces. So we'll take just a little bit, and that's 15 ounces, and that's almost 15 ounces, so we're good. I'm going to take those 2 things of dough, a little bit more flour, and I'm going to go ahead and shape my baguette. Just roll it. Don't take too much time with this, because this is your 30-minute bread, right? 30 minutes start to finish. Although this is taking me a little bit longer because I keep stopping so that you guys can see what I'm doing. But don't worry about it too much. Just kind of shape it. It's not probably going to be perfectly shaped because this isn't a 4-hour baguette. This is a 30-minute baguette. So it's quick and easy and delicious, and that's all we ask for it. We can't ask it to be beautiful too. All right, so there's one. I have a thing that does the slasher thing, but I can't find it right now, so I'm just going to do it with a knife. And the reason that we slash the loaf is because it helps it to rise evenly and properly. So you want to definitely do that. I've put on Silpat on my baking sheet, and I've dusted it with cornmeal, and I'm going to lay the loaves on top of that. I'm just going to pick them up and put them up there. There. So I'm going to lay the loaves on top of that. I'm going to give them another little shape. And if you have time, let them sit for about 10 minutes. If you don't have time, you can put them straight away into the oven like that. They will still rise and they will still be beautiful. Okay, I've let the bread rise for about 10 minutes, and I'm just going to very gently, kind of where it's flattened out a little bit, I'm going to puff it up a little bit, and I'm going to put it in the oven with a cup of water to create steam, and we'll take a look at it in a few minutes. So let's cut into these baguettes and see what we've got. It smells so good. We've got a fine crumb. It smells yeasty and delicious. And that looks like a perfect slice of French bread for garlic butter or to serve with your spaghetti, whatever you want to do. And it just took, I would say that if you've got experience making bread, you could do it in 30 minutes. You probably want to plan on it taking 45 minutes the first couple of times that you do it. All right? Okay, I will see you on the other side. Is this not amazing? 30 minutes. 30 minutes start to finish. I love it. This is like one of my favorite recipes because you can just throw it in the oven and get it done and have it on the table for everybody to eat, and everyone will think you are amazing. If you love this recipe, if you give it a try, be sure to leave a comment on the blog and let me know what you thought. Be sure to give it 5 stars in the rating, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel, okay? All right, I love y'all, and I'll see you next time.